This week on Take Care of Yourself with Tara and Jolie, we are talking about simplicity parenting. It is a book that I am in the middle of reading and I'm liking it, and I want to hear what Jolie has to say about it. Welcome to the Take Care of Yourself podcast with Tara, me, and my friend Jolie of joliecreates.com.
Hello.
Every week we talk about what we're reading, and it usually has to do with mindset, success, and just like living your life as a creative business owner. So as some of you probably know, I am about to become a foster parent. I think the phone just rang and it was a telemarketer and not them calling us. So any minute it could happen that I get a phone call. And so I'm reading all the books about parenting, but my main thing I'm looking for in books about parenting are not really rigid, like do this, don't do this, but more like reminding me of our values and the things we want to focus on with our kids. Because a lot of parenting books just have rules, and that's not going to be helpful. And I think, Jolie, it was you who told me, like, don't read the books. They'll make you feel horrible about yourself.
Yeah, that was sort of my experience. I think it was just worse as a new mom who physically gave birth to a child because my hormones were nuts. And so I already felt like a failure because of failed birth plan, and the things just didn't go the way I thought they were going to go. And then like you have a kid who doesn't sleep, and like all the books are like, oh, just do this and lay him down and he'll go to sleep, and then he doesn't. And then you're like, what have I done wrong? Instead of like, oh, maybe the book is not suited for my child.
Right. Yeah, that's huge. And I think, any parent can feel like that, but you add in like, you just went through 9 months of carrying a child, like you're just in a much weaker state. This is actually one of the things I'm super thankful for, is I'm not going to be physically beaten up and like have gone through a massive physical thing beforehand. So, yeah, it's kind of nice that I won't, and I don't think my hormones will be going crazy, even though they do go crazy every month. So I won't be like at that disadvantage. But one of the things I noticed is a lot of the books I got, like Gentle Parenting, which was fine, and The Confident Parent, and a book about German parenting, which I loved because I know so many of our listeners and so many of my friends are all over Europe, and the parenting kind of culture is so different than what I experienced just with my friends who are already moms. But all of those books went through like birth, 6-month-old, 1-year-old, which was kind of what I was looking for, in the sense that I have no idea how much food a child at any age should eat. Jolie knows this because I think I told you in a panic one day, like, yeah. I don't know how I'm going to feed this kid. Like, well, they have enough food. And also like, although I hear people talk a lot about sleep and sleep training or like feeding on demand, so many of those are wrapped up with things, natural childcare, that like my body actually just won't do because I didn't physically give birth to the child, that I wanted to read something that like fully explained it, as opposed to just hearing all the pressure that all my mom friends feel around it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes total sense.
And then also I might, like most people, start with a newborn, and then by the time they're 2, you've been feeding the child for 2 years. I might just like get a 2-year-old, right? So like,
right.
What do you do with a 2-year-old? I need a book that's like, in case you've never parented a child and you get a 2-year-old, here's what to do. So those books were helpful, but they were very age-based. And this book that we're going to talk about today, Simplicity Parenting, is not. It is more about your philosophy and your choices you make based on your values. So like have you read this before?
I feel like I have, and I'm not sure if I read it all the way through because it might have started to make me feel really guilty. But I think I know the author and at least like the premise of the book.
Okay, good. So the premise, the subtitle is Using the Extraordinary Power of Less to Raise Calmer, Happier, and More Secure Kids. The premise of the book is that kids are more anxious than ever because they have more information coming at them and they have more choice in their daily life, and having to choose between 1 to 50 toys like stresses them out.
Mm-hmm.
The part I really liked was that because I can see this in adults I know and definitely in children, is that everybody's personality is on a spectrum, right? You have some traits in your personality that, if pushed too far to the stressed end of the spectrum, are going to look like, so for example, if you're particular and you like to have everything organized and you like to do the same routine, when pushed to the stress point, that might look like OCD, right? Like massive controlling, over controlling. If things aren't the way they are, should be, then you break down. Another example is like that he uses is like a little girl is feisty and stands up for her friends and doesn't let adults like boss her around when she like when she doesn't agree with something, but pushed to the stress point, like that's a fine personality trait to have in a human. Pushed to the stress point, that might look like oppositional defiance disorder, right? So like it's any personality trait can be, when you're super super stressed and you don't feel safe, can look like a disorder, right? And like being a shy quiet kid, no problem. If you're super stressed and you don't feel safe, it might look like depression. So what he's saying is it's perfectly fine that your kid moves along that spectrum to stressed and not stressed. Stress is a normal part of life, which I like that he says like that. It's not that your goal as a parent is to have a stress-free life for your kid, but to make sure that they're not in that stressed space more than are in a stable, calm, feeling safe space. And how you can help them with that is reduce the amount of information and choices that they have to deal with on a daily basis. And a lot of that is about building routine, and he calls it rhythm, into your days and your weeks so they know what's coming. And in my experience of typical kids raised by loving, stable parents, this is maybe not as important because they have stability, like mom and dad, or mom is there to like feed them at pretty much the same time, put them to bed in pretty much the same way. But for kids who have just gone through a major disruption, being taken away from their birth parents, it's hugely important to establish trust. And like he says in the other books I read about foster care, talk a lot about you build trust through routine, through showing them you'll do the same thing every day, because that's actually how kids build trust. It's not just being like, I'm a trustworthy person, right? Like you might trust me. Well, and the thing is it's so funny because in your online business, it's the same way. You build trust with your audience by showing up consistently, by showing that you will be there day in and day out, no matter what kind of happens. And you don't just show up for a big launch and then totally disappear if you want to build long-time trust with an audience. And that is basically how children work too. You got to show up day after day. And you've been able to show up day after day for your kids since they were born. Like whether you like intentionally simplified or not, you just were there all the time. And for new kids that are just meeting you though, that's a way to build trust. I've been talking for a while. Tell me what you think of this.
It completely makes sense. And like you said, like a lot of it is just naturally at least what we did with kids, having a routine. We often, like they talk about in these types of books, like rotating toys. So they might own 20 toys, but like only 5 of them are out at one time. It's funny because my oldest as a baby did not really like routine. Like he wouldn't sleep at the same time. Like we just couldn't, he needed to eat when he was hungry and it didn't matter what time. But as an older child, like as he started to grow up, like routine is very important to him. Like he has to know exactly what time things are happening. And we used to have to make like a visual flow chart of the day for him so he knew what to expect. And I think that one of the things that parents struggle with or like forget about is how of a hard time kids have with transitions from switching from one part of the routine to the other. And so, yeah, I think when you have a routine and then you know something else is coming up, you can also help guide your kid.
Totally. And he talks about transitions because he has like 4 areas of simplifying, and one is environment, which is toys. And like he has a whole list of like all the toys to throw out. He's like, most kids, and this is American kids, I think it's different, especially like in England, I think your houses are smaller. Like most people live in a smaller space. And like if you live in the city, if you live in New York or you live in LA, you just live in a much smaller space. But here, I mean, the house, like, I know several just totally middle class, not very wealthy people who have an entire room that's a playroom that's just toys. Like there's no beds in it, it's just toys. So he's like, have it and then probably have it again. And he talks about all kinds of things with that, which we can talk about. So he talks about simplifying the environment and then rhythms. And the rhythm is like the even if you don't do it at the same time each day, you hit the same beats each day,
Mhm.
right? So they're like always a certain number of meals and usually a certain number of naps or quiet times. There's also like we're coming in from school, we're going out to school, like all of that, the more rhythmic you can make it. And he also talks about how like especially teenagers' job is to rebel against the structures of their life. So they might hate it, but if you have they know when they can talk to you each day, right? They know when you're going to provide food for them. They need that even as they're like pushing against it.
Right.
And he talks about transitions and what you said about the flow of the day. That's so cool because he talks about previewing the day the night before, especially if you have like he uses an example of two parents who are sales people, so they had like sales calls at all different times and one of them would be out of town and then the next one would be out of town and their life was just never going to be very structured and their kids seemed to have a lot of anxiety and like his advice wasn't like change your whole life. It was the night before as you're getting into bed, be like, hey, so tomorrow mom's going to take you to school and then dad's going to pick you up in his white truck, like paint a little picture and then afterwards we're going to come home and like then once you the things that you can make the same, always make them the same. So even if you're picking them up, like when I was a kid I got picked up at different times from school because my mom worked second and third shift, so like sometimes I would get out right at 3 and sometimes I would stay in aftercare until like 6, but like once she picked me up we always did the exact same thing,
Yeah.
right? And like that, so it doesn't really matter if it's the time, it's more like you always know someone's going to pick you up. You always know you're going to get food. And like that. So I thought that was great because his book isn't like, nope, you just all have to always provide the exact same thing every day, but more like if it's going to change up, you can talk them through how it's going to change. And Jay has his parents are taking care of a little girl in foster care who's I think 9 or 10 now. And she has major problems, like with what you're saying with transition, but also Jay's mom is used to having like no one else in the car with her for years and years because Jay's moved out of the house for like, 18 years. And so she will like be in the car and then be like, oh, I'm going to go here. Right. And when she does that are the days that the little girl has total breakdowns, meltdowns, like screaming fits. And we were talking to her about like, if you tell her what you're going to do and then you do it, she's going to feel more secure. But her life is already so chaotic that like, oh, let's pull in here seems fun for you. And even if it's a fun thing, it's like too much unknown.
Yeah.
And so I really love the idea of like previewing and showing the whole flow of the day. That seems just like, I like that too. I like to know what my next day is going to be like.
Yeah, that's definitely something we've experienced with me going into the office. Like I don't go in every day. And like so far I have like a routine where I'm supposed to go in like these certain days, but something has always thrown it off. Like either I have a dentist appointment, so I have to stay home when I'm supposed to be in. So like every morning my son's just like, or even at the night before and then the morning again, he'll be like, are you going into the office today? Like he just wants to know. And then he's like, okay. So he knows what that means. Like mommy's going into the office, so she gets home at this time. So like he has the understanding of like, how does this affect my rhythm of my day? And he can plan for it, but like he has to know. And like if I just like if he went to school and I was like, no, I'm not going to the office, and then like I decided to go to the office, like that would throw him way off.
Right. And I think part of it is just amount of respect of recognizing like these little people have very little control over their lives, and they can't control who picks them up or who feeds them or who takes care of them at all. Like if you decide to go to the office, you're going to do it and he can't control it. So it's just like respect for the situation that like he's in, right?
Yeah.
Like just like, hey, this might stress you out, so I'm going to let you know, as opposed to you'll be fine. That's somebody's always there. Don't worry about it. Right. Respecting that he like has these needs to know, because has so little control over it. And I think that's the thing we forget about kids is like, we're asking them to go along with a lot. You know,
Mhm.
like they don't get to decide like tons of the things in their life, and then like it all changes up, and that's stressful for anybody.
Right.
Um, I think some kids just have a bigger like capacity for that, and some kids have a smaller capacity for dealing with that.
Yeah. And it is hard, like, it is really frustrating, like, he'll have a whole plan for, like, a Saturday, and we'll decide, "Oh, we actually need to go, like, clothes shopping." Like, "You've put on your pants this morning, you've grown 5 inches, we've got to go." And he's like he hates it, like, he'll have, like, a kind of a meltdown because he's like, "But this wasn't what we were going to do today." And, like, I get it, like, Saturday's his day, like, it's the one day he has control over, but I'm like, but at the same time, I couldn't predict that we'd have to go clothes shopping. Like, I'm
Right.
sorry we didn't plan this out and give you, like, 48 hours notice, but, like, sometimes we just have to go with it.
Yeah, no, I was that kind of kid too. Like, I would ask my mom each morning what was for dinner, and she'd be so frustrated. She's like, "Whatever I make." And I'd
Yeah,
be like, "But what is it?" Like, I don't want to tell you what to make. I would never complain about it because that's not going to get me anywhere. I knew that, but like, I just wanted to know,
yeah,
you know? And like, yeah, I'm still like that. Like, that I just want to know what's happening. And
yeah,
Jay, like, the more Jay and I have talked about it, the more he realizes, like, if he's gonna throw in an extra, you know, errand, like it's just I'm gonna be able to handle it better if I know ahead of time.
yeah.
Uh, so maybe he'll be self-employed because then he can control his own
Well,
days.
that's what
That's
he
really
wants to
best.
do. That's his goal. But it's
Yeah,
so funny because we are that family that has like Monday is rice and chicken, and it's every Monday. Like you cannot
yeah,
change that. And like Tuesday is chicken curry. Like we have the same meal on the same day of the week all the time because it just like he knows and he like looks forward to it, and
yeah.
he just doesn't like surprises.
That's actually another thing he mentions is the rhythm of like having certain meals on certain nights. And he's like his example is like soup on Wednesdays. And like the soup can be anything,
Hmm.
right? But you know it's gonna be soup. And some kids just need that structure. And like the more parents resist giving it to them, the harder they're making their life.
Yes.
You know what I mean? My thing is I just need to be offered two choices. And that's one of the things he talks about is like with toys, with food, with activities, like especially the younger the kid, the more too many choices is going to be too overwhelming and they'll just melt
Hmm.
down.
Hmm.
Even though you're thinking I'm letting you do what you want to do, it's too much pressure.
Yep.
It's too much like being an adult for
Yeah.
them. And
It's
like
overwhelming.
yeah, and I mean it's overwhelming for me. Like our thing is like we've talked about Netflix cues before. So what I do is I'm like, okay, I boiled it down to 3 shows I'm willing to watch or 3 movies. You pick one of these 3. And if I ask Jay to do that, so then I can pick, you can never narrow it down. Like it's like not his ability. But with kids, that was his thing is that like simplicity in that way, like taking away choices, but giving them like respect for their need to know what's going on. Like it protects childhood. I was like, childhood is just a time you can be a kid,
Hmm.
you know, and you don't have to make a lot of decisions and feel adult and weigh pros and cons. And obviously, you need more and more of those responsibilities as you get older, but not before your time. So he talks a lot about like age appropriateness as a thing that we just sometimes forget about. And we're like, hey, 5-year-old, decide what we're having for dinner tonight. Like, that's too much pressure.
Yes. The thing with Leo is, who's my oldest, he at times is just incapable of making a decision. We just had a meltdown because his birthday was coming up and everyone was asking him, "What do you want for your birthday?" And he was just like, "I don't know." Because when you make decisions, there's the possibility that you get it right and there's the possibility that you get it wrong. And he does not like to be wrong. And so he will just not make a decision. And like, he's not doing it on purpose. Like, he's not just being stubborn. Like, he is incapable of making the decision. And like, trying to explain that to people can be hard. Like, not everyone understands, like, that sometimes kids are just too overwhelmed by all the choices.
Right. And this actually brings me to like the last chapter, which I haven't gotten to yet, but it's about how to protect kids from the adult world in the sense of like one of his examples in an earlier chapter is like a kid whose parents are like super politically active, and they have conversation about politics, and they have CNN going all afternoon, and they talk about the environment, and the kid is like 7, and he's really passionate about the environment, and he understands the issues, but like he's also showing really controlling behavior. And that so the doctor guy, the therapist guy, when he met with the parents, said like, no more CNN on in the background, no more adult conversations at the table. Like it's really precocious and cute when you have a 7-year-old who can like speak well on all these issues, but like he's thinking about how the oceans are polluted like at night when he should be sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's too it's too much information for him. And then I was just seeing a recent study showed that kids today get more information in a day than we got in the it's like the 80s, and you and I were pretty young in the 80s, than we got in the 80s, like in a whole 6 months. Because there's more screens and there's more games, and like there's nothing wrong with screens or games except for that when it's just too much information all day long.
Yeah.
Right. So it's almost like that whole, am I going to make a good decision or a bad decision? If you only know that you have 3 options, the stakes are pretty low. But if you think of all the toys in the whole world, including all the video games in the whole world, including all of the like things we could go do in the whole world, I have to pick one. That's like way too much pressure. The stakes are really high because you could get it so wrong, you know? And like, that's, so that was another thing that he talks about, is limiting the outside world, just like to your kid. And it's interesting because I mean, I haven't read the chapter yet, so I don't know exactly what he says, but he's talked about it a couple different times, like leading up to it. And I think it's fascinating because you want your kids to be involved and understand. And like, my parents weren't politically active at all. Nobody talked to me about anything other than the big issues we discussed were church big issues, right? Like sin and redemption.
Right.
Like, so I became a teenager and was in high school before high school teachers started talking about like watching the news at night and knowing what was going on in the world. And I definitely want to introduce ideas about being a citizen of the world to my kid before, you know, they're 16, but not so early that they're overwhelmed with the state of the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I was curious, for you guys, how do you control that, or does it just not come up?
Well, we don't ever watch the news. We actually don't have TV on. Like it's not like we're anti-TV. It's just that Ian and I are young enough or whatever that we're like YouTube, Netflix, Amazon family, right? Like we just don't watch like channels with adverts and anything like that. But I am conscious, like when the radio comes on, like I'll turn it down. But it's funny because we just went, and on the way to go clothes shopping, we dropped off some donations to the Cancer Research UK. And so my kid was like, what's cancer? And I was just like, I don't want to have this discussion because I know that he will then worry that one of us is going to get cancer. And so like Ian was kind of like, well, it's when people get really sick, and this, this charity does research to help find cures for that sickness. And then Rowan was like, I have asthma. I was like, yeah, okay, different kinds of sickness, honey. Like you get sick and you have coughs, and that's one thing. And cancer is like when you get really, really sick and you have to have like lots of special medicine. So I was like, how am I supposed to explain this?
Yeah, exactly. And that's actually came up in the book that I read last month, The Confident Parent. She talks about having especially when it's hitting somebody in your family, you know what I mean? Like one of your family members, God forbid, had cancer and was getting sick and going through chemo. A lot of people will like hide it from their kids, but that doesn't help their kid like understand what's going on. It doesn't comfort the kid in any way to not know what's going on. And so like talking about it when it's appropriate, when it's affecting them, because it also, what it does is it tells them that you trust them and that you think they can handle it. And then But what's great is you're there to help them handle it,
Mhm.
right? Because things your parents didn't talk to you about, then you found out in school, and then your parents not there to help you process it. So it's like, but yeah, if it's just a charity and it's not impacting your life, you're like, you don't need to think about it right now.
Trust me,
I
there are a million conversations that I don't wanna have that I do have to have. I'm not gonna have one that I don't have to.
exactly. Well, this is like when the boys were young. Uh, so my little brothers are 17 and 19 now. And when Barack Obama was elected president, we watched his inauguration. And the boys' parents are in like no way politically involved, but if they did vote, they would have voted for the other guy. And so we explained in order to be respectful to their parents, we explained to my little brothers that we're watching because it was an historic event, because it was the first Black president, and that this is really historic. So the younger one, I mean, how many years would that have been ago?
That
8,
was
10?
2004, wasn't it? So 14?
No, it's 2000. No, it was 2008. No, 2006.
Oh, no, the election years, it might have been 2008 and 2012 and then 2016. So you're right, it was 2008.
2008. So, right. So that was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And so they were 7 and 9. And the 7-year-old was like, why hasn't there been a Black president before? Why is it such a big deal? Like, he's just browner. And I was like, oh my God. Like,
Yeah.
how do I explain racism in America and the history of slavery and Jim Crow and MLK,
Mhm.
like a 7-year-old? Because I want him to understand the importance of the event and also not like, but then Jay and I were talking about it later, and I realized that if he was a little boy of color, he would already know this stuff. He would have already had like a lived experience.
Mhm.
And so we were like, this is like, I don't know how parents figure it out. But I just was like, well, we just have to start talking about it. And as he asked questions, just be really honest, and also be really like, hey, humans and like big groups of humans make really bad decisions. And like this, when we're talking about it, this is how it used to be. And it was a bad thing
Yeah.
that like a lot of Americans got wrong. And that was, and it's funny because my older little brother, we just had lunch a couple months ago, and he told me that he actually remembers watching it with us, and he remembers being like, why are Tara and Jay like making a big deal? And we were crying. Like, why are they making a big deal, and what is this about? And he's like, then over the years, as he learned more about the history, he realized how much more historic it was. And he's like, I'm really glad you guys made us like sit there and be quiet and watch it, because now I'm like, I remember where I was and I remember seeing it, and I'm glad you made it a big deal even though I didn't understand it. And yeah, so that was another one of those like, you can't like, I don't think you should go through your life and not talk about it, but also you want to protect their sweet little like innocence, you know?
It's hard, like, and it's just every day there's conversations like that, and you're just like, I've got my foot stuck in something and I don't know how to back out of this conversation.
So I don't know if I told you the story, but I have to bring it up because we're talking about hard conversations. My mom, Troy, he's probably going to kill me for telling the story. He comes home at 11 and he asks mom, today in school we talked about how babies are made. And mom was like, yeah? And he's like, I have some questions. She's like, okay, so let's do this. Let's sit down and I'm going to talk to you about sex. And he's like, can I go make some popcorn? And he goes and he makes popcorn and he puts it in a bowl and he sits down cross-legged on the couch and he's like, okay, go. And they had like a whole conversation about like, because it had been floating around and things had come up definitely before then, but she went through like the whole thing. And he was sitting there eating popcorn and asking questions the whole time. And afterwards she called me and she was like kind of shaky. And she's like, do you think that's really weird? And I was like, no, I think that says that he's like really comfortable talking to you and asking questions. And he knew this is going to be like a serious mom conversation. Let me get prepared with my popcorn.
I love it.
I know, but I still joke with him all the time.
Well, did
Like,
I tell you Rowan went through a phase of being absolutely fascinated by the process of which an egg turns into a baby? Like we had to watch like that YouTube video over and over, and he was obsessed with twins, and then he got obsessed with Siamese twins, and he wanted like he would was drawing like diagrams for people that he would meet about like how the egg splits and makes like he was so fascinated with the topic. And I was just like, oh my God, I don't even know like how he got on the topic of it. But yeah, kids
at
could.
least that's the really scientific end of things. You know what I mean? That's not like the relational end of things. That's
Yeah.
like we can talk about this in very scientific terms.
Well, we did have to get them the book about like how your body works, because they recommend now, in case you want to be up on your parenting, they recommend that you start talking about it around the age of 4. Kids should
Right.
be able to name all their body parts with the correct
Right.
names, and all of that type of stuff. And like, which I think is crazy. Like, I mean, just not crazy, but like, first of all, really crazy as a parent to have that conversation, but how different it was from like when we were kids. Like, trying to think, what age were you when you learned actually all the names of your body parts? Like, I probably was a
8th grade.
teenager. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's actually something Jay and I have talked a lot about, and we've told both of our moms, is like we will always refer to everything by an anatomical name,
Mhm.
because these kids might have come from a situation of abuse, and most of them are, I mean, they're going to be pretty young that we have in our house, but also because it can get really confusing if you have multiple caregivers and they all call it something else.
Mhm.
And like, so in order to be able to talk about it and wash it and like talk about what's appropriate, we have to have the exact name for it. Right. Because like what Jay's family called penises is really different than what my family called penises. So if a kid is going back and forth between that, like they don't really know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And so like you have to have the actual word. I feel like there's a lot of ways that in our generation we were protected from the adult world that actually isn't the adult world. It's like just the world that the kids live in, right? Like your anatomical names for your body parts.
Mhm.
Like that's not something to be protected of because it's like your own body. But
Right.
there's a lot of things like the news and the elections and like the border wall that like is a kind of stress that maybe your 7-year-old doesn't need. But then it's sad because things like bullying and people picking on you or people hurting you is like actually a big part of a lot of people's lives, a lot of kids' lives.
Yeah.
And so that's sad.
Yeah. Again, hard conversations. Rowan was picking out yarn for a hat that he wants me to make. And he originally wanted red and blue. But we found like a color work hat that had 4 colors. So I was showing him the yarn site, and he wanted red and blue and gray and pink. I am totally fine with this. I am not fine with knitting a whole hat that he's then not going to wear to school because some silly kid teases him about the pink. And I'm like, how do I don't want to discourage him. I don't want to make him feel like he shouldn't choose pink. And so I was just like, so when I'm in these situations, I always ask myself like, okay, what's true? Just so I make sure like I'm not bringing in any stories. I was like, okay, he needs a hat for school. That's true. And like, if he refuses to wear his hat, I'm going to have to make him another one because he needs a hat for school. So I ended up buying yarn for 2 hats, and I'm now making him 2 hats, one without pink and one with pink. Like I just said to him, like, oh, I love the pink. I think it's a really good choice. I think it's going to look really good. Should we do one with pink and should we do one without pink? And so we just have some choices. And he was like, yeah, absolutely. Because he gets 2 hats. So
I love that.
Yeah. It's just hard because like, I try to be so open and liberal and accepting, and like whatever he chooses is fine. I don't care if my kids want to wear dresses. I don't care about any of that stuff. But the outside world that he's in still cares. And I'm like, how do I make him feel accepted and like his choices are okay, but still know that like someone's going to say something to him and it's going to hurt his feelings, and
Yeah, I think, I mean, and I don't know, I don't have kids. I guess I can say it
you
about
still
your
have
kids.
an opinion.
I think that the thing is to like accept he won't always be accepted, and like there's nothing you can do about that.
Yeah.
So like you can instead help them be the kind of person that's okay with not being accepted. Because, like, literally everyone, even the most beautiful, like, successful quarterback kind of people, say that they were, like, made fun of or picked on or made feel like they couldn't be themselves. And so, like, it's definitely going to happen.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I
Right.
feel like we have conversations about like even about the specific topic. It's a very big topic with kids. Pink is for girls, blue is for boys. And we talk about it. We talk about how can a color possibly be related to whether you have male or female autonomy, like how it's such a silly thing, and anyone who's teasing you, it's such a silly viewpoint. But at the same time, he cares. Like I can help him to not care what kids are saying. And
Right.
and he's also, Rowan, my youngest, is my rebel child. And if he does not want to wear the hat, he will not wear the hat. No
Right.
matter what I say to him, no matter, and like part of me wants to be like, wear the hat, like you picked it, it will toughen you up. Like I think coming from like how I was maybe parented, it's just
That's
like
exactly
you
what my parents would have done.
right,
Is like, I'll
you
give you
picked
the
it, you
hat
wear
and
it.
you're going to wear it no matter.
Right. But like he won't. Like he
Right.
will just like, you know, and I'm like, well, what does that accomplish? He's going to take it off the second he's out of my sight and shove it in his bag, and his head's going to be cold. Like, what am I actually accomplishing through that conversation? So it's so hard.
Yeah, 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 it is. I mean, and I think I love the like two hat idea. And I also, yeah, it's like knowing that, because I used to think this with the boys a lot, like, how could I make the situation not hard for them?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like their parents got divorced and they just had some hard things happen in their life. And I just can't make it not hard. Like, you want to, and I can't even imagine when it's your own kids, because it was just my little brothers and I wanted their life to not be hard. And I would like cry about that. And Jay would say, like, but it's okay. Like, everybody's life has hard things, right? Like, everybody gets picked on. You can't protect them from that. You can just like make sure that they can always come and talk to you about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, make sure you're there as like the safe place, which
Yeah.
is the thing that comes up over and over again in this book, is like, by doing rhythms, by simplifying what you're asking of your child and like all the different things you're doing and all the things you have in your house, like you just become this safe haven. And he calls it like the old shoe effect. Like, you might just be a boring old shoe, but like kids need that,
Mm-hmm.
like, safe space. And there's a thing we learned in the foster care classes, the very little bit that was actually about parenting was and I'm looking for this book that's about this philosophy, and it's the cycle of support, and it's basically like you're a safe base that your kids go out from, and then you're the safe place to land when they come back, when they circle back.
Mm-hmm.
So like, you can't hold on to them and overparent when they're trying to go out, but then also you have to be available when they come back. And
Yeah.
like, they're going to come back in like not the best time, not when you want to pay attention to him, like when you're in the middle of something else. Like, he'll have a meltdown about Pink on a day when like you're just really busy and you have other things you guys need to get done. But you just got to be there, right? You got to have all the conversations beforehand, and then also be willing to have all the conversations when he comes back with the pink cat.
Yeah, that's something I remember even from like when they're a toddler and throwing tantrums to even now when my oldest is having like meltdowns. This like, whatever your behavior is, like, I'm right here. Like, I'm just going to sit in this room with you and like, I'll leave you alone. You don't want me to touch you. Like, I'm fine, but I'm staying. Like, no matter what you say to me right now, no matter like what you do, like, I'm still right here. And I think like it's sometimes you're like, oh my God, the kid's screaming, just leave them and walk away. But like, well, one, my kids would follow me normally. Like, they're like, I hate you. And they're following you around the house. Like, just, you know, so you know that they hate you. But yeah, it was like, it would just make things worse. And like, we really had to figure out this concept of like, just being like, nope, you're stuck with me. Like, I'm here and we're not leaving until like you're calm and we've settled this. And my oldest kind of hates it, but then like he loves it because you like, you know, at the end, like he's giving me a hug because he doesn't like to talk about things. And like, you can tell, like, I'll ask him about something like, do you want to talk about this situation? And the tears will come. He's like, no, I'm fine. I'm like, okay, but your body's having a reaction that's telling me you're not fine. He's like, I don't want to talk about it. You're making me mad. And I'm like, okay, but like, we need to talk about it when our bodies are having this big of a reaction. We need to talk about it. And it'll take him so long. He'll sit there for like 10 minutes. I don't want to talk about this. You're making me mad. Why are you doing this to me? You're bothering me. You're annoying me. He'll go through like every list of insults. Like he has this list and he's just like going through them. And he's like, but almost like he's checking in, like, are you still here? Like, have you given up?
Yes.
Okay, nope, she's still here.
Yes.
Let me move on to the next one. And then he gets to the point where he actually talks about it. And then we help him, whatever the situation is. We figure out what the real worry is, and he's calm. And then he gives me a hug, and like, we're good. And he's so happy. Like, you can see like a weight's been lifted, but you've got to stick with him through every single rejection that he's going to throw at you. And he's going to really try to not talk.
Yes. That is like, that's classic though. Like in all the stuff I've read about, kids testing to see if you really love them. Like, it's like, I'm going to keep pushing you away and pushing you away and pushing you away. And that's what all this stuff about, especially kids you don't already have a long-standing relationship with, that you're not supposed to do timeouts. You're not supposed to go to your room and close the door, because what they need to know, and that's what I was thinking as you were talking, is like, think about the message you're actually sending. You're teaching them to talk about his feelings, sure, but the message you're really sending is like, no matter what, I love you. No matter what, I'm not going to leave you. And like, that carries you through all the rest of his life. Like, maybe he never gets a handle on his emotions, but he will know, like, I am like worthy of being loved no matter what kind of mood I'm in.
Yeah.
It's huge, like unconditional love, and knowing that you don't have to earn it. You're just going to get it even when you're like a total jackass. that's really important. And, that is like the biggest lesson. That's so awesome that you do that. And also, it's good to hear you say you have to do that, because in the like foster and adopt community, a lot of people talk about what you just described, almost to the point where it seems like parents will only have to deal with it if they do foster and adopt, right? So it's almost like this is another way your kid is messed up, is that you'll have to sit there through them pushing you away and pushing you away and pushing you away. Good to hear bio kids do it too.
Yeah, we've talked about this with child psychologists as well, to help with some of Leo's problems, or not problems, with Leo's things. And she said basically, like, our job as parents is to just give our children a toolkit, like to take who they are and to give them the tools that they need to navigate the world. Like, we are not ever trying to change our children into something that they're not, which I think helped us a lot, because like with the routine things, so Leo's very structured. He needs a lot of routines. And I think this goes back to just how parents were when I grew up. But part of me was like, well, we shouldn't give him routines, like, because he needs them so much. Like, we should force him to learn to not need routines, right? Like, if we make everything too structured, we're making it so easy. Like, he's never going to learn to not deal with routines. And like, the therapist was like, if he needs routines, if that's what the structure that he needs to navigate his day calmly and in control, like, then that's what you give him. The routines is not who he is. The routines is a tool in his toolkit. And our job is to just fill up that toolkit. And I was like, oh, okay.
And the thing is he can build confidence, right? Routines at this age can help him build the confidence that he can navigate the world. So when things can't be in his routine because of life, and as he gets older and older, he's going to encounter like more and more of like, hey, just come over to my house and play right now. Or like, we had planned on this, but I got sick, so I can't. Like that. It seems like the confidence and the safety feeling he has now will help him be able to deal with that more. But yeah, I totally agree. The way I was raised was like, well, you just go the way that I'm going because you're my kid and you'll just deal with it. And that doesn't necessarily make you give you the strong foundation you can then like go off of. Yeah. Right. And it goes back to like protecting them from the adult world, like not asking him to be an adult and be able to just handle it. Right. Because that's kind of the like way you and I were raised, which is like, so you need routine, but you're not getting it. So handle it.
Yeah. So like, would you recommend the book to parents or prospective parents?
So to go back to what I was saying at the beginning, it's not like a age by age or step by step. It's more of like a philosophy. So if you're feeling like um, either really overwhelmed with a number of things in your house, like there's a chapter on what to get rid of, or if you're feeling like like Jolie mentioned about the transitions, that transitions are hard, or you're constantly like, no, come on, no, come on, it's time to do this. Like I think the book says it in a bunch of different ways to deal with that.
Hmm.
Like I've thought about just a couple of the things, but there's like a million ideas, a million examples. And if your value is like, I want a peaceful home where kids can like play, and by peaceful I just mean not stressful. I don't necessarily quiet, because depending on the age of your kids, it's gonna happen or not happen. But like uh yeah, I think if you're feeling like the house is like fraught, there's a lot in here to help like like kind of sift through the layers of like where are we bringing tension and stress. Um so yeah, I recommend it. I mean, I kind of was like, I think I'm going to get it from the library again when we like after we have the kids for a year or two. And right now we literally have no toys. We have like a stuffed animal per child, and then if they like go back to their birth family, we will get another stuffed animal, and we're just going to get the toys based on the ages and genders and their interests, right? So yeah, sorry, I just said gender and it took me down this path. What you were saying about the pink cat, I just had to say you have to deal with the outside world, and we like have been looking at onesies and wanting like gender free onesies, which is just impossible to find. Like
Hmm.
there's like a very narrow range of like gray and black basically. And what I said is like, so I really love this print on this one, but it comes with two other ones that are like soft pink and soft purple, like trimmed, even though they're white with cute prints on it, like just animals, right? Like bunnies. Why are
Yeah.
bunnies? I don't understand. And um and I was like, I actually don't mind if we get it, right, and then say we get it for a girl, but then our next foster is a boy, but we have to be aware of like how comfortable their birth family will be,
Right.
right? Like in our own home, put the boy baby in a pink onesie, I don't care, but like we need to make sure when we take it out, because their birth families might have totally different ideas about what's appropriate. And so it's kind of hard because we can't just have like a gender free onesie extravaganza. Anyhow, sorry. So that, yeah, like the book is a lot about simplifying, de-stressing, like making it so that things aren't as tense, giving you just like a million ideas for ways to do that.
Yeah. It sounds like it can be really helpful, especially if you didn't grow up with that kind of family. Like in some families, a lot of this rhythm routine is like very um, typical, especially if you come from any kind of like Waldorf or Montessori background, Steiner background. They're all very about the rhythm of the home and the rhythm of the seasons, and it's lovely. But if you didn't grow up with that, you might find it helpful just to read a different viewpoint than what you grew up with.
Totally. And yeah, he was a Waldorf teacher for a
Yeah.
while. So, and I really didn't understand when people would talk about it. Jay's cousin is a principal. I think she owns a Montessori preschool, which is as far as they go here in Tennessee, only up until kindergarten. And she would describe their, I did not understand it. So this helped me understand it a lot too, which a lot of it was values Jay and I had talked about and what we wanted to do. And I think a lot of it also goes to if you have, if you're in a situation with a child who's either anxious or insecure or has an insecure attachment with you for whatever reason, a lot of it is about building trust through like simpleness and easiness as opposed to discipline. And that's something a lot of the books about attachment and foster care talk about a lot. And there's a lot of discipline options that aren't available to you if you're a foster parent. So this just gave us like more ideas. We ended up having a lot of really good conversations about this book.
Oh, good. I'm glad. It sounds like I might enjoy rereading it now that my kids are older, because I
Yeah.
feel like routine and rhythm is really easy to implement when you have a like younger child. I mean, for me, it was because like I could kind of implement the structure of like we know our, we get up and we have playtime and then we have a snack, and then like it helps me get through my day as not a single parent, as a stay-at-home mom. Like routine
Right.
and rhythm helped me just get through my day. But now that my kids are older, it's like almost harder because like the outside world is imposing so much on us. It's like, have we actually found a rhythm in our home, or are we just reacting to like the schedules that we have dictated by, school and work and stuff?
Totally. Totally. And that's part of the reason I was interested in reading it, is just to like kind of like move the priority up on the list of when the kids come to, I mean, like you said, with babies, it's a little easier because they're going to sleep and then change them and then feed and then play and then sleep again. But like if a 3-year-old comes, like just how to manage it all day without being in constant reactionary mode to a 3-year-old's whims.
Mm-hmm.
Like I felt like it would be good just to have like an outside source tell me how I could prioritize that and give me ideas for how I could do it.
Cool. So that book, it's Simplicity Parenting.
Yep. By Kim John Payne, who's actually a dude. I assumed it was a woman for a while, and then he's obviously a dude.
Yeah. So if you read it, come over to our Facebook group, which is Take Care of Yourself with Tara and Jolie, and let us know what you thought of it.
Definitely. And if you are enjoying the podcast and you're listening on iTunes, or even if you don't listen to iTunes on iTunes, pull it up on iTunes. Search iTunes for Take Care of Yourself. It'll pop right up. Leave a review and a star rating. That helps other people find us. And the show has changed a lot since I started it a couple years ago. So the reviews will help tell people what the show's about now.
Yes.
And we would super appreciate if you could go do that. So go leave a review on iTunes.
Yes.
So thanks so much for listening. Thanks for talking with me, Jolie.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll talk to you guys next week.